Björk Gudmundsdóttir is an Icelandic singer-songwriter, composer, music producer, and actress. She was born in 1965 and has been involved in music since early on in her life. After being a part of multiple bands during her teenage years, she set out for a solo career in 1993. Since then, she has released 10 studio albums, 2 soundtracks, and multiple live and remix albums. Her 10 studio albums are Debut in 1993, Post in 1995, Homogenic in 97, Vespertine in 2001, Medulla in 04, Volta in 07, Biophilia in 2011, Vulnicura in 2015, Utopia in 2017, and Fosora in 2022. She's critically acclaimed and has won numerous awards during the years, but you probably know her mostly for the image that has formed around her. Her singing voice is unique to say the least, and with her quirky personality, many simply label her as an odd artist. Most know her for her unique approach to electronic and pop music, and her bizarre and controversial music videos. In this video, I want to unravel the layers to Björk, so that whether you're a fan or a curious observer, you can gain a deeper perspective into this artist. She's been called a fairy, an elf, and even an extraterrestrial. If there's one thing you know about Björk, even if you've never heard her music, is that she's weird, even for an artist. She has a strange name and makes strange music. She comes from a mysterious land and rolls her R's in an odd accent. And then there's the interviews.
Such a big star like you, why don't you go by plane?
The air pressure forces the molecules to go tiny.
Aha. I see.
You're not going to get angry tonight, are you?
I worked it out.
Yeah.
I looked at my book.
Oh no.
That I'm not going to talk about tonight.
Right.
And I saw in my book I get angry once every 7 years.
Right.
So next time is the year 2003.
So
love and making love and so it's like a material that usually, like how the ivory kind of becomes just like, it's erotic. It's quite unusual.
The image that's been created around her, justifiably or not, is the first barrier to entry for any potential listener, and her music makes justice to that image. Apart from the sharp sound of her voice, her music sounds like pop written for humans by, well, like aliens or elves. Even her poppiest tunes, such as Venus as a Boy or Hyper Ballad, have a strange aura that's between ethereal and surreal. But there's much more to Björk than simply being an enigmatic pop star with an eccentric persona. Let's go deeper. It's not pronounced Björk or Björk. When pronounced properly, her name actually rhymes with... Well, you tell them.
And what do the Americans call you?
Björk.
So, Björk.
Björk.
Björk. It's...
Think of jerk.
Think of jerk.
Like if someone is a real jerk.
A real jerk.
And then you just say Björk. Jerk.
There you go. Björk attended the 2001 Academy Awards ceremony and wore this beautifully unique dress in the shape of a swan. This is the same dress she's wearing on the cover of the 2001 album Vespertine, and she wore it many times during the tour for that album. Contrary to popular belief, it was not designed by Alexander McQueen, who did work with her in many other instances. But instead, this was the work of Macedonian designer Marjan Pejovski. Today, it has become one of Björk's most iconic looks, and it gets referenced regularly in popular media. While she may have popularized it, the dress was actually debuted a month earlier by the model Alec Weck. Every couple of years, a new generation discovers this video and it makes the rounds on the internet like it's the quirkiest thing ever. You've probably seen this video of a young Björk dissecting an 80s TV set and comparing the components inside to a model of a city. Look, someone even AI upscaled it. The clip originates from a live concert movie of the Sugar Cubes, a band which Björk was a member of prior to her solo career. The movie is called The Sugar Cubes Live at Sabor. In it, there are clips of the bandmates doing mundane things and discussing completely unrelated topics, and these clips are interspersed between every couple of songs to break the monotony of the pre-recorded concert. The TB breakdown clip is not as unrelated as the others, however, because Björk talking about her TB directly precedes their performance of their song Dream TV, a song about watching so much TV that your dreams become reruns of sitcoms. So Björk was having fun with her bit, and the dead giveaway is her final anecdote about a poet trying to scare her from watching TV. The poet gets so philosophical and alarmist about it that when Björk finally discovers the science of how a TV actually works, it all seems so ridiculous to be bent out of shape over a silly little machine. And she concludes that
You shouldn't let poets lie to you.
So it's just a funny little story on a short cutaway from a live concert movie. It's not that weird in context. Not much else to say about this except that I do have my suspicions on who that poet may have been. While looking up Björk and her TV, I also found this, so here you go.
My name is Björk, and your television is just about to explode.
You're welcome. Tragically, one of the most well-known facts today about Björk's career is the incident where a stalker mailed her a in the 90s and pre-recorded his final moments. Trigger warning, this will contain discussions of planned violence, mental illness, and self-unaliving. Skip here if you don't want to hear that. Okay, cool. Ricardo Lopez was a mentally ill superfan in Florida who developed an unhealthy parasocial relationship with Björk and took personal offense to her dating life. In 1996, after she began dating British producer Goldie, Lopez decided that he would leave a permanent mark in her career as a form of delusional punishment. His initial plan was to mail her a with HIV-infected needles, but that proved too difficult. He settled on mailing her an acid with the hopes that she would be permanently disfigured. He sent the package to her address in the UK, and believing his plan would be successful, committed himself to filming his days leading up to his self-unaliving. He recorded hours upon hours of footage documenting his mental decline and ultimately unalived himself on camera while Björk's music was playing in the background. The police found his body and the footage and notified the mail service before the package was delivered, and the was disarmed safely. In truth, Björk's manager would have been the one to receive the package, but thankfully this didn't happen. And ironically enough, at the time Lopez was spiraling in his room recording his manifesto, Björk was actually in Miami, only a few blocks from his residence. The incident obviously impacted her, and while she made public statements at the time during the aftermath, she has since remained quiet on the matter. I was very upset that somebody had died. I couldn't sleep for a week, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't scare the out of me. That I could get hurt, and most of all that my son could get hurt. And a few years later, she stated this about the incident. I wanted to see the video. Once something like that has broken its way into your life, rather than wrap it up and kiss it goodbye, you have to understand it, find a level with that person from a human point of view. It was difficult. I don't think it's right to talk about it now. It was 4 years ago. She sent flowers to Lopez's family and moved to the southern coast of Spain to record her third album. As for Lopez, he had been seeing a psychiatrist at the time for his mental health issues, but the psychiatrist did not consider him a danger to anyone. Lopez's friends and family knew that he was obsessive to an unhealthy degree and that he had recently discovered Björk, but they claimed he was a functioning adult who had never shown himself capable of such an act. The recordings he made in his final days can be found online, but honestly, you don't need to watch such a thing. That's pretty much the whole incident, but there's whole YouTube videos on the true crime side of YouTube here dedicated just to this if you're interested. Jesus, this guy made a 1 hour video? What the f could he be talking about for 1 hour? Okay, back on track. Grateful Grapefruit refers to her bizarre and super cute acceptance speech at the 1998 Brit Awards, where she was awarded the Best International Female Artist.
I am grateful grapefruit.
She beat out Celine Dion and Janet Jackson in the 90s. I think she earned the right to give whatever speech she wanted. Another iconic award show appearance is Björk at the VMAs in 1995, where she wore these awesome red boots with her dress and stomped her way up to the stage in the most Björk fashion ever. One final Björk award ceremony moment that you may have seen was in 2012, where she received the Webby Award for the Biophilia app, which I will get to, and accepted it with a simple
A-E-I-O-U.
At this point, it's just tradition for Björk to troll her acceptance speeches, and we'll see more examples of that as we go down the iceberg. Acceptance speeches are overrated anyway. What are you supposed to do? Thank everyone in like 15 seconds? It's not possible. Everyone knows it's a group effort, so you might as well have some fun with it. Last on this layer, I want to discuss Arca, who for the past few years has been a frequent collaborator to Björk. She's a Venezuelan artist and producer who has worked with Kalela and Kanye West, before the Nazi shit, and has multiple albums of her own. Her style is like hyperpop meets reggaeton, and her lyrics discuss topics of sexuality, alienation, and her own gender transition. Most new fans barely getting into Björk's music are very familiar with Arca and her unique fingerprint. She collaborated with Björk in 2015's Vulnicura and featured prominently nearly on every song in 2017's Utopia, to where it can almost be considered a joint album between the two. That's layer 1, but it's only the surface. Let's dig in a little deeper. I Love to Love is a 1976 song by Tina Charles. Björk, 11 at the time, made a recording of that song which made its way to Icelandic radio stations and led to her getting a record deal. This culminated in her real debut album, the 1977 self-titled Björk. It's comprised mostly of pop covers translated into Icelandic and a few original tracks written by her stepfather. She was offered the chance to do more albums like this but turned it down, saying she wasn't ready for the experience of fame and didn't like it at the time, nor did she like having achieved it doing covers. It was then the young Björk decided that she would write her own music. The self-titled album sold 5,000 copies, which was gold in Iceland at the time. I quickly mentioned the Sugar Cubes earlier on, but now we're gonna dive in. Björk was part of many bands in her teenage years, and the Sugar Cubes was the most popular and commercially successful one. Björk was the vocalist, obviously, and you may also know Einar Örn Benediktsson, who featured in Gorillaz' 2007 song Stop the Dams. Einar Örn played the trumpet and made weird noises with his mouth. It actually fits the music once you get into it. They were active from 1986 to 1992 and put out 3 studio albums: Life's Too Good, Here Today, Tomorrow Next Week, and Stick Around for Joy. They gained international fame from their debut single Birthday and continued writing in both Icelandic and English for the international market. They played on Saturday Night Live, Top of the Pops, and even had a reunion concert in 2006. The music is fun and full of energy. It's like a mix of like 80s punk or pop and with a little bit of new wave. Personally, I think if you enjoy Björk's music, you're gonna like at least a few tracks from the Sugar Cubes. The Sugar Cubes would be the last band that Björk would be a part of before embarking on her solo career. Kukl was another musical group that Björk partook in. Kukl was active in the early 80s and released 2 studio albums. Their music is more like post-punk / new wave, but it's a little too indie for me. It never really caught my attention. They had one controversial televised performance where Björk was very obviously pregnant, and some viewers mistook her to be underage. She was 20 at the time. After Kukl disbanded, some of the members would go on to form the Sugar Cubes. Dancer in the Dark is a musical drama from the year 2000 directed by Lars von Trier and starring Björk in the lead role. The plot involves Selma, played by Björk, who is a Polish immigrant with her young son in 1960s America, where she works a factory job handling industrial machines to make metal parts. She's slowly losing her eyesight but cannot let anyone know because it would jeopardize her job. She is in America to save money for an operation that would prevent the same disease from taking her son's eyesight, but she's also very prone to daydreaming musical scenes in her head while she's doing mundane tasks. As you can imagine, a half-blind person who works with heavy machinery and chronically daydreams is a recipe for disaster. And the plot continues from there. A whole lot more things happen, but I won't spoil it here in case you're interested in watching it. I saw this movie in like 2013 and I hated it. Critics praised it for being dark and an emotionally heavy film, but I just think it's a bunch of trauma porn. A lot of bad things happen in this movie. Bad things that don't even need to happen. Bad things that wouldn't make sense to happen. But they happen, and things continue to get worse and worse. I don't think it's dark or emotionally taxing. I think it's just Lars von Trier putting a character through the worst shit imaginable for a WASP audience to feel guilt and gratitude about their lives. Many thought Björk would branch off her career into acting after this, but in fact, the experience deterred her from it. Details were sparse for many years, but it was well known that she and director Von Trier did not get along on set. For years, people wouldn't know the details of what happened, but Björk swore off acting afterwards. Still, the film won many awards, and Björk herself won Best Actress at the Cannes Film Festival that year. Sonic Symbolism is a 9-part podcast that Björk put out in 2022, where she, alongside philosopher and writer Oddny Aid and musicologist Asmundur Johnson, discuss each one of her albums leading up to the release of Björk's 10th album, Fosora. They discuss Björk's emotional landscapes in her life around the time of each album. It's really good insight into her mind and her emotions, and listening to her discuss her music making process so candidly gave me a new appreciation for it. If you're a fan of Björk, you're probably gonna love this. You can find it on Spotify. This podcast is actually where a good number of entries for this Iceberg come from. In 2004, Björk released her 5th album, Medulla, an all a cappella pop album, but not the way you may think. Most people think of a cappella as a gimmick with a barbershop quartet singing a cute little jingle. However, Björk's approach to Medulla was to tap into raw human emotions, calling back to our most ancestral forms of art. It was only logical that this would lead her to the oldest instrument, the human voice. With the help of other vocalists from around the world, including Tanya Tagaq, Razel, Do Kaka, and Mike Patton, she created Medulla out of hums, yells, grunts, throat exercises, whistles, yodels, and even beatboxing. Of her 10 studio albums, Medulla is easily my favorite for being a high-production version of the most ancient form of human expression, singing. Most new fans regard it as her strangest album, and it's probably not a good starting point if you're barely getting into Björk. But if you approach it with an open mind, I'm sure you'll also find it to be special. Matthew Barney is a contemporary visual artist who works in the mediums of film, photography, sculpture, and drawing. His work is abstract and difficult to grasp, and even more difficult to acquire online. Barney is on this Iceberg because he was Björk's romantic partner for about 13 years, and not only have they worked together on occasion, but also having some general knowledge of their relationship is helpful towards understanding Björk's art from about the year 2000 onwards. He is most well known for his multi-part series The Cremaster Cycle, which is a set of films released non-chronologically from 1994 to 2002. The Cremaster Cycle is supposed to be an exploration on the cremaster muscle, the tiny muscle that raises and lowers the testicles in men. It was defined by art critic Jonathan Jones as one of the most imaginative and brilliant achievements in the history of avant-garde cinema. It was also described by Adam of Your Movie Sucks as
Yeah, the Cremaster Cycle is 6 hours and 38 minutes of just nonsense. Nonsense and annoying bullshit. Look at the are you looking at the poster right now? Of him dressed up in that stupid getup and that stupid makeup? The whole thing is just nonsense. It's awful.
I don't think it's quite that bizarre. I think there is some substance to gain from this series. If you want an interesting deep dive into the meaning of the Cremaster Cycle, I recommend this video by the YouTube channel Styleless Substance. Cremaster Cycle was released as a limited 20 set of DVDs that go for at least $100,000 a pop, and in 2007, Cremaster 2 sold for $571,000. So yeah, they're not easy to get your hands on. There's one other particular project that Barney and Björk worked hand in hand on, but I will be discussing that later. Also, while some of Björk's songs past the year 2000 hints towards her relationship with Barney, her 8th album, Vulnikura, is fully dedicated to their breakup. Sigurjón Birgir Sigurdsson, better known as Sean, is an Icelandic poet and writer who has collaborated with Björk on some of her most iconic songs. Sean has provided lyrics most notably to her single Bachelorette from Homogenic, I've Seen It All, featured in the Dancer in the Dark soundtrack, and Oceania, which was written for the 2004 Olympics and appeared on Medulla. Sean also contributed to the story of the animated movie Anna and the Moods, which I will get to, and also co-wrote The Northman alongside director Robert Eggers. Björk has mentioned on occasion how the two of them have been friends since they met in their teenage years, which leads me to believe it was him. He told her about the TVs melting your brain or whatever. He's the reason for the TV breakdown video. Oh yeah, the Olympics. Björk was asked to sing at the opening ceremony for the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens. She wore an absolutely massive dress that was supposed to cover all the athletes, but it failed to reach all of them by the end of the song. The song Oceania was written for this event, for which Sean contributed his poetry to. It's a song about the evolution of humanity from the point of view of the ocean. It's really cool. The song appeared on Björk's 5th album Medulla, so it was written for a cappella to fit the themes of that album. Anohini is an English singer-songwriter and an avant-garde artist in her own right that has contributed to Björk's music for many years. Her first collaboration was on Björk's 6th album Volta, where Anohini and Björk duetted on the song The Dull Flame of Desire, and she also sang on My Juvenile. Anohini would once again appear on Vulnikura on the song Atom Dance. In interviews, Björk has discussed their close friendship and how they sort of assess each other's unreleased music, meaning Anohini has had a great influence on Björk's artistic direction for the last few albums. As for her music, I've never really gotten into it, but I understand that it's pretty emotionally heavy. All I know is that I saw her cover of Gloria Gaynor's I Will Survive, and I will never be the same person I was before watching that. Michel Gondry is a French filmmaker whose work you're probably familiar with even if you don't know his name. Gondry has directed a lot of music videos and films. Some of his most famous directorial credits are the music videos for Everlong by the Foo Fighters, The Hardest Button to Button by the White Stripes, and Around the World by Daft Punk, as well as the cult classic film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Gondry has collaborated with Björk on a number of her music videos, arguably some of her most famous ones. He directed the videos for Human Behavior from Debut, Army of Me, Isobel and Hyper Ballad for Post, Yoga and Bachelorette for Homogenic, Declare Independence for Volta, and Crystalline from Biophilia. I also found this clip where he made a piano paint contraption and had Björk do a painting from the movement of her fingers while she played the piano.
Should I stop it in between? Or
Yeah, you can go.
is
I have to repaint your apartment.
what?
Speaking of Michel Gondry, Björk has stated in the past how the music videos for Human Behavior, Isobel, and Bachelorette, all of three which were directed by Gondry, are connected. I had a whole segment here connecting all three videos, finding all their different Easter eggs, references, and connections to each other, but it ended up being like 10 minutes long, so I think I'll just dedicate that to its own video. But just for now, know that those three videos are definitely very much connected, apart from the individual meaning of the songs. Björk doesn't speak much of her musical inspirations, but Kate Bush is one artist that she can't help but gush about. Björk has made it clear over the years how much she admires Bush for her artistry as well as her feminist message, seeing her as a fellow creative woman in the music industry who is underestimated because of her gender. In a September 2022 interview, she said, "I was always quite offended by how often Kate Bush was written about like she was insane or a crazy witch, or me being a crazy elf. Time has been kind to Kate Bush's legacy, with her music gaining a resurgence in popularity, and her song Running Up That Hill topping many music charts in the summer of 2022, similar to how Venus as a Boy has gained modern popularity. I've been listening to Kate Bush a little bit for this Iceberg, and I gotta say, her style of pop is really timeless. Probably even better fit for this era of music than her own. There's definitely more connections between these two artists, but to be frank, I don't know enough about Kate Bush to speak with much authority, but maybe the next Iceberg can be on her, huh? Actor Norman Reedus, known for his roles on the show The Walking Dead and the game Death Stranding, made an appearance in a music video for Björk back in 1994 for the song Violently Happy. Look, there he goes right there. This is a pretty infamous incident. This happened in 1996 outside the Bangkok airport. Björk was leaving the airport when she was approached by reporter Julie Kaufman, simply stating, and at this point Björk just lost her shit. She started to wall up this reporter. It's pretty gnarly. Later, Björk claimed that Kaufman had been harassing her and her young son, asking her about his mom despite Björk promising a press conference the following day. So I suppose the "Welcome to Bangkok" comment was just the tipping point. Björk later apologized through the phone, and Kaufman declined to press charges. This refers to an online joke that's been circulating for a few years that spawned from this image of Björk and Beyoncé meeting in 2003. The meme reads,
Björk, it's so nice to see you.
I have riddle. What can pass through trees without making rustle of the leaf?
This spawned a whole wave of memes of people having fun with Björk's riddles. While it is pretty funny to imagine regular people interacting with the eccentric, chaotic energy of Björk and being made to answer a riddle upon first encounter, there is actually a bit of truth to it. In a 2011 interview with Rolling Stone, while discussing why she chose to make a puzzle out of her 7th album, Biophilia, she said, "I'm just obsessed with riddles. It felt like the music industry was off the grid and I wanted to solve the riddle." There's a little more to this quote that I have omitted regarding her love of riddles, but we will return to it later. This is a GIF that circulated in the mid-2000s of Björk and P. Diddy on a phone call to make a collaboration happen, and they can't seem to communicate properly. The whole thing lasts about 3 minutes, so I'll leave a link in the description if you want to watch the whole thing. "I Should Buy a Boat" is this meme that circulated in the late 2000s that depicts the existential realization that all adults come to at some point in their lives, where they realize there's nothing stopping them from spending their money frivolously and diving into an expensive hobby, depicted through an image of a cat reading the morning paper with a 1,000-yard stare, realizing that he should buy a boat. The original image is from the music video to Björk's 2004 song Triumph of a Heart, directed by Spike Jonze. The song is a certified banger, and the entire video is a laugh too if you're interested. It tells the story of Björk, dissatisfied in her marriage to her cat husband, and leaving him to party for the night, only to be hungover and stranded in the morning. The dutiful husband finds her and brings her back home, and then they dance to the end of the song. If you've ever seen this gif of 50 Cent pulling up to a car with a cat in the driver's seat, it's from this video as well. This refers to the many Icelandic words and phrases that Björk throws in her songs, which are actually not Icelandic at all. It's really just gibberish. This Alsamanshe is a recurring one. She has a whole library of made-up words she likes to sing, probably because of their rhyming pattern or maybe just their vibe really. Here's this cool video compiling a few of them. Lyrics websites often confuse these words for actual lyrics and you can get some wonky results, but now you know to look out for these phrases. I personally like to think it's from a future language that hasn't been invented yet, like one of those memes from the future that we just don't understand yet. The Northman is a 2022 historical action film directed by Robert Eggers and written by Eggers and Sean. Oh hey Sean, nice to see you again. The film is an adaptation to the Scandinavian legend of Amleth, which was the direct inspiration for Shakespeare's Hamlet. If you know the Shakespeare version, you pretty much know the plot of The Northman. If you don't know Shakespeare's Hamlet, well, it's basically The Lion King. This film is Björk's return to acting 22 years after Dancer in the Dark, as she plays the role of a seeress who sends our hero on his quest for vengeance. Her casting is particularly fitting, seeing how a large part of the plot takes place in Iceland. It's a super good movie, bloody as hell, but check it out, you won't be disappointed. The music video for Pagan Poetry was directed by Nick Knight. It's on the Iceberg because for a time it was highly controversial. It was banned on MTV for a time. It was not available on YouTube for the longest. It was number 6 on NME's 20 most controversial music videos ever, and was on Rolling Stone's most NSFW videos of all time. So what's it about? It's a collection of shots without a narrative that, just like the song, explore themes of passion and romance from a woman's perspective, and particularly the physical pain that comes with love, such as painful intercourse and childbirth, and of course the emotional pain that accompanies it. The shots are cut back and forth between close-ups of pearl piercings being applied on someone's skin, then shots of Björk topless with strands of pearls pierced all over her body as she sings the song, and finally home footage of Björk and her partner having sex. Granted, the sex footage is highly stylized to where you can only make out the shapes, but they're very obviously performing in different positions. It's not vulgar at all, really, but if you are a pattern-seeking monkey, then you can capture the emotion of what's happening in the moment, especially with the context of the song. But there are no vulgar or gratuitous shots. The song's fire too. This refers to how there is a version for the song Cover Me from Björk's second album Post, where the vocals were recorded in a cave. I did climb in a dark cave and sing the vocal for Cover Me. I have to credit Nelly Hooper with that idea though, he did it as a treat. Put me blindfolded in a car, and when I got to the cave, he had headphones and generators set up with the song, and I sneaked in and sang it in one take. One of my favorite experiences ever. Yeah, there were bats in there. This version appeared on the UK version of the Army of Me single. I like it enough, it's pretty unique, but personally, I prefer the album version with the plucked harp. This refers to the music video for the song Where Is the Line, which in itself can be a very interesting listen, but when paired with the music video can be seen as straight up horrific or hilarious if you don't know what to expect. The song itself is, I don't know, like a hard rock opera? It's done entirely in a cappella for her album Medulla. The best way to understand it is to see it as humorous, you know, a sing-songy type story, especially seeing how Björk says that she had Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody in mind while she was editing it. The music video is notable because it was originally meant to pair with the art project Versations Tetralogia by Gabriela Friedrichsdottir, but was later re-edited to fit Where's the Line. It was directed by Friedrichsdottir and was filmed in a stable where Björk, wearing a dress made of sandbags, gives birth to a creature covered in a white substance who does a strange dance. Then the birthing sequence is played in reverse, so the creature retreats back inside the sandbag dress. Explosions start going off in the stable, and then these other creatures made out of hay come out and cover Björk until she is no longer visible, and the video ends. I have my own theories on the artistic message of the video, but I think I'll keep those to myself and let you make your own conclusions. For a long time, the HD version of the video was impossible to find, and even today the video isn't on YouTube, but it is available on the internet. The album version of the song There's More to Life Than This from Debut is unique because the vocals that actually appear on the actual album were recorded in the bathroom of a bar, which is fitting if you're following the message of the song. The ambient sound of the party and the doors closing and stuff actually adds a unique atmosphere to the song. Of course, this leads to the studio recorded version of the song being humorously dubbed by fans as the non-toilet mix. This entry refers to how Björk's fourth album, Vespertine, has been described by her as a winter album. She also uses words such as celestial and domestic to describe it due to how she felt at that point in her life. Björk had just come off of her tour for Homogenic, which had her living at full speed, and the two albums before that had been very energetic and ecstatic, not to mention that she was also coming off doing Dancer in the Dark, and that worldwide recognition had come to her very suddenly and recently. Björk has mentioned how at that point in her life, she felt like she needed time to heal and be intimate and homely. And even though this wasn't initially the point for Vespertine, the album turned out feeling like a cozy cabin in a snowy forest. It feels like whispers from a loved one on a cold day spent indoors. It's like a concept album, but the concept is literally just a vibe. Vespertine is very good, very unique. If you didn't know about it before, I highly recommend you check it out. It's a very approachable album. It definitely still has Björk's unique artistic voice, but as it goes, it's some of her most easy to digest music. You know Tesla coils, right? If you've ever wondered if anyone has ever harnessed the magnificent power of these things to make music, then check this shit out. This is from the tour of her 7th album, Biophilia, which was by far the wildest tour she's ever done. Björk had a number of instruments made and then had to find a way to move them around for the tour. The Tesla coil was used fittingly for the song Thunderbolt, where the cracks of electricity make the bass line for the song. She had this brand new instrument made which is now called the Gamelest, which you can hear on the songs Crystalline and Virus. And check out this huge swinging pendulum of death instrument used on the song Solstice. Pure insanity. Live at the Royal Opera House is an official DVD of her live performance at the Royal Opera House in London in December of 2001. This was during the tour for Vespertine, which is an album dedicated to small sounds, whispers, wintry feelings, and Opera House is the perfect setting for a live performance of this. Everything was on point that night, from the Greenlander choir to the orchestra to the experimental noise duo Matmos adding beats in the back. And of course, Björk looked stunning in both of her dresses, and her performance was flawless. It has become one of her most iconic performances, beloved by fans and a definite must-watch for anyone getting into Björk's music. You can find the whole thing here on YouTube. It's perfect for a cold day with a hot drink. This is another iconic performance. Björk performed for MTV Unplugged in 1994 for the tour of Debut. If you're unfamiliar with MTV Unplugged, well, congratulations, your knees don't hurt yet. And go do your homework. Well, MTV used to be dedicated to music, and they had a concert series where they'd have famous artists play acoustic, non-electric versions of their set. So no amplifiers, or pedals, or synthesizers. Think of it like a single-cell version of the NPR Tiny Desk concert. Well, Björk has always been an electronic artist, and Debut is pretty much a dance house album, but this live performance is actually pretty stellar. To mimic the wavy sounds of a synth, she had a guy playing glass cups filled with water. There's a harpsichord making crunchy noises, there was an organ, and some sitars. Oh, and a jazz band. It's all super cool, and it's here on YouTube. Go check it out. In 2008, online magazine Stereogum released Enjoyed, a tribute to Björk's Post, which is pretty much what it says on the tin. It's a tribute album to Björk's second album, Post, comprised of covers to every track on that album, made by different artists. Post is perhaps Björk's catchiest, poppiest album, so it's pretty interesting that the covers in Enjoyed actually veer quite far from that and get into some really artsy territory. I particularly enjoyed Olga Bell's cover of It's Oh So Quiet. The most notable acts that contributed to Enjoyed are probably Shoo Shoo and The Dirty Projectors. It was actually through this project that Björk became aware of the Dirty Projectors and thus their collaboration to make Mount Wittenberg Orca, which we will discuss later. Voltaic refers to a bunch of material related to Björk's sixth album, Volta. This includes DVDs, CDs of remixes, music video compilations, live performances, album art, etc. It's a lot of material, but if you're going to get into Voltaic, I recommend the live DVD that was filmed in Paris. This is an awesome, high-energy performance, especially since she plays some of the songs from Medulla with the full arrangement from the Volta tour, and they sound insane outside of acapella. Vulnicura Strings is a companion live album to Vulnicura with string arrangements. It's a cool different take on these songs, and on some actually I think it works better in this arrangement than in the album version. One notable fact is that one of the instruments used in the live performances is the viola organista, an instrument designed by Leonardo da Vinci. It's basically a piano shape with strings in the back and everything, except that instead of hammers hitting the strings when you play a note, there are spinning wheels in the mechanism that act like a bow, and when you hit a note, the string is lowered into the wheels, making the sound that a stringed instrument makes when played with a bow. Thus, one person behind the seat can mimic the sound of a whole string section, and because the wheels that hold the note are constantly spinning, one can hold a note indefinitely with relative ease, a trick which you can hear in the really long drawn-out notes on the song Black Lake. So, to go along with her 7th album, Biophilia, Björk released an app consisting of 10 other apps corresponding to the songs of the album. Some songs have a type of game that you can play, and others are a type of instrument where you can rearrange the sounds of the song and build your own version. It's actually really cool and creative, and it expands the artistic themes of Biophilia. The Biophilia app was the first app to be added to the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. Today, the app is available for download on Apple devices. There are some bootleg APK files for Android, but I wouldn't mess with those. They're probably not safe. If you've listened to Björk's 8th album, Vulnicura, then this is probably pretty self-evident. Vulnicura is not just a breakup album, it's the quintessential breakup album. It revolves around the themes of broken love and heartbreak due to her separation from her partner of 13 years, artist Matthew Barney. Björk has mentioned how she didn't go into this project with the intention of making a breakup album, but it was the main thing on her mind and it was encompassing all of her emotions. Literally every song deals with the end of her relationship, from an idealistic hopefulness in Atom Dance, to an absolute heartbreaking overspill of emotions in Black Lake, to a somber mourning in Family. Part of the idea of Björk's 9th album, Utopia, revolves around the imagery of a woman-led utopian society. After the men have ruined things with their war and aggression, the women and children can start anew in a post-apocalypse of natural and mutant beauty. At least this was the imagery that Björk envisioned for the sound of Utopia. You gotta remember, this was her first album after her separation from her partner. To mimic this feeling in audio, she made an active decision to have minimal bass lines throughout the whole album. The melodies and harmonies represent the emotional aspects of this society, while the bass lines, the aggressive and stubborn parts, are missing. This is compounded especially because of the main instrument used in Utopia, which was chosen for the imagery of... One odd visual that Björk came up with was that of the baby albino giraffe. I know it sounds weird, but hang on. She imagined an innocent, beautiful creature, but odd in a way, like with a long neck, and white, but not like a white of purity like a dove, more like a white of albinism. And which instrument fits this description better than any other? That's right, folks. Utopia is made up of mostly flutes to fit the imagery of the baby albino giraffe. If you've never listened to Utopia, you probably think this is the craziest shit you've ever heard. But if you have, then this description makes total sense. Somehow it totally works. Just picturing the sound of the album, I imagine the baby albino giraffe like playing in a field with its family in Wakanda or something. In another example of Björk using imagery to describe the vibe of an album before going into it, for her 10th album, Fosora, she envisioned it as underground with roots everywhere, but fun and bubbly. So, it's her Mushroom album. Pitchfork has a quick promotional video with her about it. It's a fun watch. The music video for Venus as a Boy was directed by Sophie Muller. It features Björk preparing breakfast and getting intimate with some eggs. The imagery is very obviously sexual as she becomes distracted from the task of cooking and starts singing and fantasizing about the eggs. The premise comes from the book The Story of the Eye, where a young couple experiments with their odd sexual desires. At one point in the book, an egg is used for sexual stimulation. It seems initially that Björk and Muller were not on the same page for the premise of the video, as Muller wanted to use a fried egg for the sexual imagery. Thus, we get this wonderful quote from Björk. She kept going on about it being fried. I was saying, no way is that book about a fried egg. I'm sorry. Poached? Okay. Boiled? Okay. Raw? Okay. But not fried. The music video for Army of Me was directed by Michel Gondry, and it features some of the finest surrealism ever put to video. The premise of it is like dream logic. Björk has metal teeth and she's driving a huge truck through town, but her truck breaks down. She stops by a dentist's office, who happens to be a gorilla, and he finds a diamond in her mouth. The two of them fight over the diamond and Björk wins and runs out with it. and uses the diamond to power her truck. Then she goes to a museum where there's a sleeping man on display. To get him to wake up, she sets a bomb and runs out, exploding the museum. She finally runs back in after everything's exploded and the man is awake, and the two embrace and the video ends. If it makes no sense from my explanation, and even from watching the video itself, then allow Björk to explain. I thought I should be driving a very, very big truck to try to wake this person who's asleep. So I get the biggest truck in the world, and I'm so mad I've got metallic teeth because when you're really angry, you grind your teeth. So I have to go to the dentist who tries to steal away from me a diamond that I don't even know I have. When Michel gets his stroke of genius, and in the video for Army of Me, wants a dentist that's a gorilla to find a diamond in my mouth, some people call it nonsense. But it's probably the most realistic way of expressing what situation I'm in. All these people trying to take things away from me, and the gorilla finding a diamond that I don't even know I have and then stealing it. Army of Me is so much about me actually learning that I have to defend myself. I have to stand up and fight the fucking gorilla. Once I've got the diamond and run away with it, it becomes massive because it's mine. But if the gorilla had kept it, it would have gone really, really tiny. That's surrealism for me. Wow, that recontextualizes everything. Again, dream logic, but logic nonetheless. Oh, and the video was banned briefly on MTV for the depiction of bombing a museum. Björk loves to DJ at parties. There's plenty of pictures of her DJing. Björk has done a lot of photo shoots in her career, so you're gonna find all kinds of things in her catalog. One notably funny example is this shoot from the 90s for Ray Gun magazine. This is a 1992 interview by Joe Escalante of Björk and Sigtryggur Baldursson, also known as Siggy, while they were still part of the Sugar Cubes. The interview is an absolute troll on Escalante's part, and by the end, everybody's just having fun and throwing out bullshit answers. While some see it as super awkward and cringe and a train wreck of an interview, I actually think Escalante does a good job with his light ribbing and having awkward moments from like his incompetence as an interviewer, that the two of them actually open up in a very human way. It's pretty obvious to me that Escalante is playing a character for the interview. It's kind of like seeing Michael Scott interviewing a punk band. At this point in my research, it became pretty clear to me that Björk is a bit of a goofball. Despite how much I like her music, I've never actually done this level of research on her, so I was under the impression that she was a weird artist, the way artists are weird. You know how pop stars do to be taken more seriously as artists? They act like they're different from everyone else? Well, I thought Björk was doing more or less that, except she was actually weird. However, after watching so many interviews and seeing her reactions to strange and awkward occurrences, I can see that she has a sense of humor about everything. Sure, it may be an odd sense of humor, but a lot of times when she behaves in ways that people find weird, I think she's just breaking social norms and fabricating awkward situations just to give herself a laugh. Like, if you're expecting a serious artist who will discuss their work with the highest reverence, and then this skinny woman with a weird accent starts telling you about her life in Iceland, that's funny. I think to form the narrative that she's a weird artist, Björk's humor has gone underrated for far too long. And maybe it's also because she's a woman, but I think the media found it easier to make her out to be a weird artist to gawk at, rather than a clever artist with comedic talent, and in a way, I think she just rolled with that narrative instead of trying to fight it her whole career. An unexpected achievement from Björk. Apparently in 2007, she became the first female artist to headline Coachella, which is pretty incredible considering all the amazing female artists of the late 90s and the 2000s. Maybe it just says more about the culture of Coachella and how its demographic has changed over the years. Coachella wouldn't have another female headliner until Beyoncé in 2017. Spit and Snot was the name of an all-girls band and one of the many bands that Björk was a part of in her teen years. Björk.fr is a surprisingly deep fan website dedicated to Björk. Whenever I couldn't find context for an entry in this iceberg, I could always count on Björk.fr to have something on it. To be honest, I don't really have a clue who they are. They're obviously French, and the site runs on donations, it seems, but it's easily the most comprehensive catalog of Björk on the web. Just brush up on your French before heading there. In 2015, the Museum of Modern Art in New York City added the Biophilia app as a permanent collection and also for 1 month exhibited a retrospective of Björk's art from debut to her latest album then, Vulnicura. They had the swan dress, the bell dress, the post paper jacket, the red stomping boots, the Kool-Aid Man costume from Volta, the lesbian robot. They had the crazy ass instruments from Biophilia on display. Here's the pendulum instrument. And apparently they even had the Tesla coil going every couple of minutes and they would play a song. No lie, the pictures look super cool and I'm actually so jealous that I didn't get to see it in person. That's 2 layers down, and that's pretty much what a casual fan would know about Björk. As we go into this next layer, we will delve into some die-hard fan territory, with some of her rare songs, obscure features, and even some whole albums you may not know about. Selma Songs is the 2000 original soundtrack album that Björk created for Dancer in the Dark. Björk tried to put herself in the perspective of the character Selma, who's losing her sight and finds music in the sounds of everyday objects as well as the machines at her job. Thus, a lot of the sounds in this album are made from household objects mixed with industrial noises. She stated that a difficult part of writing this soundtrack was trying to make music from the perspective of a person going through a really rough time in life, while she herself was at her most jovial and outgoing. Personally, I really like it. I think it's honestly wasted on a shit film, but hey, that's my opinion. Being that it's a full 7 songs with a unique style and perspective, some fans consider it her extra 11th album. Drawing Restraint 9 is a 2005 art film by American visual artist and Björk's romantic partner for many years, Matthew Barney. Like a lot of Barney's work, it's brimming with imagery and symbolism, but it's nebulous on its plot. I don't know, it's got something to do with whaling vessels and Japanese tea ceremonies and sculptures made of petroleum jelly. Björk appears alongside Barney in the film as the 2 protagonists, but I can't really tell you much what happens. 1, because it's really dense art, but 2, it's super hard to find. From what I understand, it was during the filming for this film, which mostly took place in a whaling vessel, where Björk wrote most of Volta. This is where she got the inspiration to write songs like Wanderlust. At this point in her life, she literally had no stable home. Her home was a ship traveling the world. The soundtrack to this film, also titled Drawing Restraint 9, was made by Björk, and it is absolutely lovely, just a joy to listen to. Okay, in all seriousness, I absolutely adore this soundtrack. It's one of my favorite things from her. In my mind, it's Björk's most masculine, emotional landscape. It's something completely out of left field for her. However, this soundtrack is so bizarre that it's not how you want to introduce someone to Björk. If the boys give you the aux chord and you play Storm, it's over, you lost aux chord privileges. Drawing Restraint 9 is wild, it's messy, it's emotional, it's vulnerable. If you're up for hearing Björk at some of her most abstract, give it a listen, you won't regret it. It is, in my opinion, some of her best work. Just skip Holographic Entry Point. Barney wrote that one and it's a whole different vibe. This is a 2005 album entirely comprised of remixes and covers of Army of Me. This came about after Björk realized how much love there was for this particular song and how people were taking it and making their own versions. So she had people send their remixes and covers to her website. Then she turned the best ones into an album and donated the profits to the United Nations Children's Fund in response to the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake tsunami. Mount Wittenberg Orca is a 2010 collaborative EP by American indie band The Dirty Projectors and Björk. The Dirty Projectors are an interesting band with a unique style. Definitely they have some of that 2010s hipster indie vibes. Think of like early MGMT or that song Young Folks that was all over the place for a minute. But add to that a little bit of math rock and a lot of soul music, and you get the Dirty Projectors. Mount Wittenberg Orca came about because the Dirty Projectors did a cover of Björk's Hyper Ballad in 2008 for the Covers tribute album Enjoyed. That caught her attention and they started collaborating. Together, they put on a benefit show in Manhattan to fight AIDS and homelessness, and later released Mount Wittenberg Orca with all original material. It's really good and definitely not too weird or hard to get into, and it's actually really cool to hear Björk collaborating in a band again. She definitely sounds more like a feature here than a main songwriter. Gling Glow is a 1990 jazz album that Björk made in collaboration with these gentlemen. Gudmundur Ingolfsson, Gudmundur Steingrímsson, and Þórður Hógensson. It's mostly comprised of jazz standards translated into Icelandic. It's a super fun album and definitely easy listening, and Björk was super playful with her voice for it. In December 1999, Björk, alongside the Brodsky Quartet, performed 2 concerts in the iconic Union Chapel in the UK, consisting of special string arrangements of songs from Björk's first 3 albums, as well as some covers of Elvis Costello, Meredith Monk, as well as others. These concerts were rather spontaneous to the point where Björk only heard the string arrangements for the first time while performing. She sang without the aid of a microphone, as well as barefoot, to not add any extra noise to the recording from the overhead mics. These recordings were intended to be released as a CD, but that never happened. However, they have made their way online and fans have made their own bootleg playlists out of it. They're truly beautiful performances with a haunting echo and an inherent rawness that is well worth a listen. Björk's cover of Elvis Costello's Who Do You Think You Are is actually one of my favorite songs ever, and it holds special meaning to me. If you're a fan of Björk and you haven't heard of these recordings yet, you are in for something special. Okay, so Björk has a lot of one-off songs that aren't on any of the albums, such as B-sides, which are unique songs that appear on the flip sides of her vinyl singles, or collaborations that don't appear on any album, or single instance live performances and stuff like that. I like to group all of these as rare songs. These songs aren't particularly hard to find online, but you won't find them on Spotify or Apple Music, or in any of the 10 studio albums. In my opinion, some of her rare songs are my favorite things from her. I won't be discussing every one of her rare songs on here, but I will touch on some of the more notable ones that I think have some interesting context. Play Dead is the final song on debut, but this was not the case originally. It was first released as a single as part of the soundtrack for the 1993 film The Young Americans. It was later added to all future copies of Debut as a bonus track, and also made an appearance in the 2002 Greatest Hits compilation. In 2007, Björk contributed to a tribute album to Joni Mitchell by covering her song The Boho Dance. Björk has in the past mentioned her admiration for Mitchell, crediting her as one of her artistic inspirations. Evelyn Glennie is a deaf Scottish percussionist who collaborated with Björk on her percussion-only track My Spine. In turn, Björk appeared on Glennie's song Oxygen. Björk wrote the Comet song alongside Sean for the 2010 animated movie Movements and the Comet Chase. In my opinion, this is one of her most unique songs, like you have to hear it to know what I'm talking about. I also remember when this song came out, she gave a few interviews about the movements and what they meant to her growing up and stuff, and it just hit me in so much nostalgia because in Mexico, we had Despite Tom York of Radiohead always having the highest praise for Björk, and the fact that the two of them always get lumped together as artists with weird styles, they've only ever really collaborated twice and on small projects. The first time was in Selma's Songs, the soundtrack to Dancer in the Dark, where Tom lent his vocals to duet with Björk on the song I've Seen It All, but only in the album version. The second time was in Björk's single Natura, which she released to promote the protection of the Icelandic environment. Tom again lent his vocals to the track, but it was all done through file sharing, seeing how Björk was on tour at the time. Gloomy Sunday is a song composed by Hungarian pianist Rezsó Szeres and published in 1933. You may know it by its nickname, the Hungarian Suicide Song, due to the urban legend that accompanies it. Real quick, the song is really sad vibes and talks about committing self-unaliving following the death of one's lover. Legend goes that hundreds of people actually committed self-unaliving after listening to this song, but that's wholly unsubstantiated. Gloomy Sunday has been covered by dozens of artists, and in 1999, Björk made her own rendition. It was for a one-time live event for the Walden Woods project, where multiple artists sang covers, including Joni Mitchell, Stevie Nicks, Gwen Stefani, and many others. Björk's live rendition of Gloomy Sunday is beautiful and haunting, and without bias, I swear it's my favorite version of that song. The live recording of the event was compiled into the Stormy Weather CD, brought to you by AT&T. She sang the song once more in 2010 at the funeral for Alexander McQueen, who had been her longtime collaborator and friend. Anton is a 1996 Danish film about a young boy who is obsessed with flying airplanes since his father died as a pilot. Björk contributed to the soundtrack by writing an absolute banger called Nu flyver Anton, which translates to Now Anton Flies. The song is fully in Danish, and according to some comments online, it's actually quite fluent, although I wouldn't be able to corroborate. Trust me though, give it a listen and you'll agree she did not have to go this hard on a soundtrack song. On a side note, here is Björk in 1998 receiving a Danish Grammy and accepting it with a Danish nursery rhyme. The song Trance was originally meant to be the album closer for 2007's Volta, but for one reason or another, it never made the cut. It was finally released in 2010 as a tribute to Alexander McQueen, the iconic fashion designer who had passed away earlier that year. McQueen was the designer behind many of Björk's iconic outfits. The song is somber and severe, very fitting as a song of mourning. The lyrics are somewhat cryptic, but I get the feeling of a general confusion with life and trying to find hope in a time of paralysis. In 1997, British film composer David Arnold released a covers album of popular James Bond themes covered by contemporary artists. Having worked with Björk earlier on the film song Play Dead, she was invited to collaborate and recorded a cover of You Only Live Twice, sang famously by Nancy Sinatra in 1967. Björk finished the recording but withdrew her contribution before the release of the album, stating that she'd learned the hard way not to cover your favorite songs because they're really good, but instead to cover bad tunes and make them good. I wonder if she's referring to her cover of Gloomy Sunday there, which she recorded around the same time, although I doubt it because that one actually turned out super good. She's probably referring to some unreleased project where I imagine she was stoked to cover a song she really liked, but it didn't turn out the way she wanted. Her cover of You Only Live Twice was released as a free download from her website, and I gotta admit, I think she's right. Look, I love Björk, and we stan Björk in my household, but her version does not hold a candle to the original, not even close. Sir John Kenneth Taberner was an English composer who based many of his works from his Orthodox Christian faith, and he generally tapped into themes of mortality, spirituality, and faith. His work gained worldwide recognition when his Song for Athene was performed at Princess Diana's funeral in 1997. Taverner became interested in Björk's vocal abilities and wrote an entire piece with her in mind. Prayer of the Heart was released in 2004, performed by the Brodsky Quartet and sang by Björk. It is the Jesus Prayer, sang like an incantation, in Greek, Coptic, and English, repeating over and over again, while the music cycles through the circle of fifths until the prayer is sang at least once in each key. According to Björk, Tavener was inspired to write Prayer of the Heart from his experience of seeing an Indian monk who prayed so much that he died in a praying position. And the people of his community decided that he had achieved such a euphoric state that the question of burying his body seemed kind of absurd, seeing how he had no use for it. Prayer of the Heart is a beautiful piece. It's 15 minutes long, but the time flies. You can put it on in the back while you study or do some work, or, you can just contemplate your mortality and the larger purpose of your life. Maybe find something worth all of your devotion. Or not, whatever. Spoiler alert. Skip ahead if you don't want Dancer in the Dark spoiled for you. In Dancer in the Dark, the song 107 Steps is played when Björk's character is being escorted from her prison cell to the gallows as she's counting her last steps. It's fitting for the character that's always making music in her head to be seeking escapism during this time, only to be abruptly interrupted mid-song at step number 107 because she's reached the end. Fans have always speculated if there's a meaning to that number specifically. However, in Selma's songs, the soundtrack to the movie, the song doesn't get interrupted at 107 steps, but continues up to 141. Could there be a significance to that number? Well, it seems that you can find many instances of the song actually being titled 141 Steps before it was settled on 107. What's more, the way the song ends abruptly in the movie makes me think that director Lars von Trier hadn't settled on which point he wanted to end the character's walk, so the title of the song couldn't be finalized until he made his decision, which I'm sure wasn't annoying at all. As for the number 141, I personally don't think there's any specific reason for it, other than it fits the beat of the song. Björk is usually more prone to being descriptive with her song titles, not cryptic. Versations Tetralogia is an art project by Gabriela Friedrichsdottir that consists of a multimedia installation of sculptures, paintings, videos, and music which Björk contributed to. The 5-track album that accompanies this piece is pretty hard to track down, but the song North, which was Björk's main contribution, can be easily found on YouTube. Bedtime Story is a single from Madonna's 1994 album Bedtime Stories. It's on this Iceberg because this song is written by Nelly Hooper, Mario de Vries, and Björk. This is the only instance where Björk has written a song for Madonna, and her style is noticeable. Nelly Hooper worked a lot with Björk on her first 2 albums, and the signature sound of the duo is present in Bedtime Story. It straight up sounds like a 90s Björk song, like you can almost hear her voice in the song. When I was offered to write a song for Madonna, I couldn't really picture me doing a song that would suit her. But on second thought, I decided to do this to write the things I have always wanted to hear her say that she's never said. The message of Bedtime Story basically says words don't matter, logic doesn't matter, knowledge doesn't matter, just trust your instincts, trust your unconscious, and trust your emotions. The song was later repurposed and remade as the song Sweet Intuition, which appeared as a B-side to the single Army of Me. I want to take a quick moment to say thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this content, then please consider leaving a like, as that would help my channel find a bigger audience. And subscribe if you would like to see future content from me. Really quick, I'm gonna plug my live streams. I go live on Twitch every Monday through Thursday starting roughly around 7 PM Central US time. So catch me one of those days if you want to ask me something or recommend me something, or if you just want to say hi and hang out. Okay, that's all. Now let's get back to layer 3. Oh my god, Waffle House Girl coming in. Holy shit! Oh my god. Yeah, it's not her first fight, okay. In the 90s, trip-hop artists Tricky and Björk were a couple for a time. Tricky would go on to contribute to her music, mostly in post, and she would feature in his songs Keep Your Mouth Shut and Yoga. That's Yoga with a Y. MacLeod is an electronic music duo that has contributed to Björk's many remixes, and they have collaborated together for their 1997 song Lilith. 808 State are an electronic music group active since the 80s that collaborated with Björk early on in her career, and she featured on their songs Oops and Q-Mart. It is through this collaboration where she met Graham Massey, who would become a frequent collaborator with her as a writer and producer. The Powers That Be is a double album from the experimental hip-hop group Death Grips. It's super good on its own, but it's on this Iceberg because for the first disc, Björk's voice is sampled on every single one of its 8 tracks. And she's never been shy about her love for Death Grips. On Facebook, she posted, "I am proud to announce that my vocals landed on the new Death Grips album. I adore Death Grips, and I am thrilled to be their new found object. I have been lucky enough to hang and exchange music loves with them and witness them grow. Epic, onwards." And she's not kidding when she says she loves Death Grips. Here she is at a party DJing some of their music. At the 1994 Brit Awards, Björk teamed up with rock musician PJ Harvey to perform a live version of Satisfaction. This is wholly a rumor from what I can tell. It was rumored that a Björk sample would appear on the track Wolves on Kanye West's The Life of Pablo album, but that wasn't the case. Björk intended to have Beyoncé contribute to Medulla, but due to scheduling conflicts, this ended up falling through. This is an album about voices, and she's got the most amazing voice. That's a shame, cause Beyoncé's soulful vocals would have absolutely killed it on Medulla. In the late 90s, Björk and Wu-Tang Clan had a collaboration set up that never materialized. Before the release of Homogenic, Björk contacted RZA to help concoct some beats for the album, but their schedules never lined up. Later on, Björk visited New York City where they wrote a couple of songs together. Sometimes when you do things and you don't plan them, it's magic, and I really think what we made was magic. But I think that because it wasn't part of the whole Homogenic thing, and it wasn't part of what Wu-Tang were doing at the time, it was better as an idea, if that makes any sense. Sadly, this collaboration is probably lost completely and will never see the light of day. Jola Kötturinn is a holiday song that Björk recorded in 1987 for the Icelandic folk story of the Yuletide cat, or the Christmas cat. Apparently, the tale of the Christmas cat began as a way to encourage children to participate in the cloth-making chores for the winter. Story goes that if the Christmas cat catches you during the season and you can't produce a new piece of clothing, the cat will eat you. Björk also released another Christmas song in 1995 named Jólas Veinar, which is about the Icelandic Christmas lads, troll-like creatures that visit children on the 13 nights leading up to Christmas Eve. This second song is much more poppy, but if you're not from Iceland, then you're not the intended audience and you won't really get much from these songs. Now, we get to the good stuff. From here on out, these entries are mostly things I had never heard of or rabbit holes that I just discovered while researching. Okay, we're gonna start this layer a little bit heavy, but don't worry, the topics get lighter as we go on. Okay, so you know Dancer in the Dark, the film directed by Lars von Trier where Björk played the lead role and scored the soundtrack for it, yada yada yada. Well, there had always been rumors associated with its production. It was well documented that Björk and von Trier did not get along. Over the years, stories would come out of Björk behaving antagonistically on set, walking off set for days, ignoring von Trier and walking away when he was near, even eating a shirt as a protest and spitting at his feet and saying, "Mr. von Trier, I despise you," on a regular basis. It must be noted that these accusations were mostly started by von Trier himself after filming concluded. Björk was very adamant about not wanting to work on a film again and wrote her follow-up album Vespertine as a need to transition away from that part of her life. But for many years, she kept silent on what had happened on set from her point of view. It wasn't until 2017, during the height of the Me Too movement, where she felt comfortable to open up about her experiences. She discussed some truly disgusting behavior from von Trier that I don't really want to get into, that paralyzed her and escalated until she decided she wasn't going to put up with it. After deciding to actively fight von Trier's advances, Björk claimed that Von Trier conspired with his producer colleague to make the experience difficult for her, from actively bullying her on set to methodically spreading rumors over the years to assassinate her character and make her out to be a difficult actress. Von Trier denied these accusations, but Björk wasn't having any of that. She doubled down on her accusations that started to paint a proper picture of what kind of experience it was on set, and everything started to make much more sense then. Her label immediately came to her defense, pointing out how besides Von Trier, no one who's ever worked with Björk has ever had a negative experience. On the other hand, Von Trier's producer buddy was outed from his own company due to separate allegations of harassment. After that, Von Trier did the smart thing and for once in his life just shut the f*** up. Okay, back on track. For this entry, I had to delve into the world of astrology, so a quick lesson first. So apparently there's way more to astrology than just your sign. It's like a whole thing. What you would call your sign is just your sun sign, which changes every 30 days or so, and then there's your moon sign, which changes every 2.5 days, and then there's your rising sign, which depends on where on earth you're born, and it changes like every 2 minutes. And each one of those says something about you or whatever. Well, apparently Björk is a sun sign, moon sign, and rising sign Scorpio, triple Scorpio. Now, I don't know enough about astrology to make any conclusions from that, but feel free to elaborate yourself. In 2007, for the release of Volta, a contest was announced on Björk's official website for creators to pitch ideas for a music video for the track Innocence. Due to the heavy beat on the song and the slapstick dress, that's her word, not mine, that she wore for the cover of Volta, she envisioned an animated video and wanted to see what other people would come up with. After a few hundred entries, they settled on 11 main contenders which fans could vote on. Ultimately, this video won the contest, directed by a French duo that simply go by the name Annabelle and Fred. Today you can find many of the other video submissions here on YouTube. Sadly, time hasn't been kind to upload quality since HD video uploading wasn't available on YouTube in 2007. There's still a lot of fun to sift through, but I definitely feel like an archivist going through old texts in a library. A number of Björk's songs hover around the 80 beats per minute tempo, and she herself has speculated that it's an unconscious quirk of hers due to 80 beats per minute being very close to her walking pace, and how when she was a child she would always walk to and from school while singing at the same time. For the creation of Homogenic, one thing that was very important to Björk was the beats. She wanted the album to sound a certain way, kind of subtle and chaotic, like lava. Homogenic was always meant to be a very patriotic album for her, so she wanted the beats to create a sort of landscape of what Iceland would sound like. So while she was out touring and dealing with other things in her life, she hired someone to program about 100 beats on drum machines with her specific vibe in mind. Later on, when she was ready to write and record, she would pick up these beats and fit the best one around a specific song and do some final touch-ups on it. It's definitely an interesting way to write music, and it puts the album into a new perspective, thinking how the beat for Bachelorette could have been on Yoga and so on. The Juniper Tree is a 1990 Icelandic indie film based on the Brothers Grimm fairy tale of the same name, and it stars Björk as the lead. It's in black and white and was shot on an unspecified small amount of money. I haven't seen it yet, but it's got quite positive reviews and critical reception. Right now it's sitting at 100% on Rotten Tomatoes with 20 reviews. This is referring to an interview where she mentioned how she just makes the albums without explicit intention to write some songs as singles, but it's her label that chooses which songs will be the singles and the promotional stuff. That's interesting because Björk is one of those artists where you can get into them because of a catchy song, which is usually a single, and that one song is pretty much reflective of the rest of their work, and now you know why. In 2000, the Prime Minister of Iceland said that Björk had done more for the popularity of Iceland than most other Icelanders, and so decided to gift her a small island as a royalty payment. However, she refused due to privacy concerns. If you're given an island, they'll just have tourist boats circling around it pointing at you. I already get stalked down the street in Iceland and get tourists that walk up to me and poke me with their finger like they've just bought a trip to Disneyland and they met Donald Duck. Good point. Plus, if they give you an island, can you imagine mowing the lawn on that thing? Bonus point. This is not the island that they offered Björk, and Björk has never lived here. That was just an internet hoax. This cursed spelling is how you may come across Björk's name on the internet. I figure it must have something to do with like unrecognized characters across different web languages or something. I don't really know what I'm talking about. I could not find much on this entry. It looks like at one point this website was a huge encyclopedia for Björk fandom, but there's nothing now. Even the Wayback Machine shows up nothing. This is simply referring to an April Fool's post about leaked original album art for Volta. In a 2017 interview with BBC Radio 6, Björk listed some of her favorite artists at the time, and it's more or less what you'd expect. She name drops Kalela, Serpent with Feet, Anohani, Jörg Frey, and Rihanna. Wait, one of these is not like the others? I guess it just goes to show how everyone loves Rihanna. According to Björk, her iconic swan dress was actually David Bowie's idea. Rest in peace, David Bowie. It is true that he was the one who inspired me to wear my swan dress at the Academy Awards. He told me, I always wondered what you would look like as a bird laying eggs. It is not known what kind of relationship the two artists had beyond fashion talk. Björk's son has followed his own path into music, and the main group that he is involved with is Sindri Eldon and The Ways. It's like alternative rock, I'd say. It's not bad. Tank Girl is a post-apocalyptic comic book created by Alan Martin and Jamie Hewlett. Yes, that Jamie Hewlett. That had a movie adaptation made in 1995. Originally, Björk was set to star in the movie as the character Subgirl, but she later dropped out. Her song Army of Me was used in the movie, but after Tank Girl released and flopped, Björk and her label decided to separate all promotional material between the song and the movie. In my opinion, that was the right call because Army of Me has become one of Björk's most iconic songs and music videos. While Tank Girl does have somewhat of a cult following, peace and love, but nobody really cares about it. Tapi Tikarras was the name of one of the bands that Björk was a part of in her youth, and the name translates to cork in the bitch's ass. From what I can sleuth, it refers to a saying that someone told them about their music and how it fit like a cork in a bitch's ass, and thus the band got their name. Space Ghost Coast to Coast is an animated talk show on Adult Swim where real celebrities would go on and be interviewed by the animated host Space Ghost and his friends. Think of it as a predecessor to the Eric Andre show. In 2001, Björk made an appearance on the show as Space Ghost's eccentric wife. The whole episode is on HBO Max right now if you want to watch it. It's season 7 episode 3, and I gotta say, it's pretty funny. Oh, look who's here too! This is a somewhat awkward interview she did live on Instagram for the magazine Dazed in 2019. It's not clear what's happening for about 2 minutes where Björk is just sipping coffee staring at the camera, waiting for the interviewer to enter the chat. When the interviewer does finally enter, they commit the cardinal sin of conducting an interview without headphones. So the audio from the device's speaker has a ton of feedback and it's just really unpleasant to listen to. Eventually they fix it, but a large part of the interview is ruined. I remember when I saw this happen live, more than anything it was just confusing and then super unlistenable when the audio finally kicked in. It's a little cringe, but it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. This refers to how, in 2007, following Britney Spears' public mental health crisis, Björk sympathized with her so much that she wrote Spears a letter in solidarity and comfort, having gone through similar pressures from dealing with fame. In an interview talking about the instance, Björk said, "I feel so sorry for her. I have sent some of my thoughts that I wrote down when I was going down similar stuff. I was able to move away though, but she can't. But she can always stay in Iceland at my place." In 2011, Björk hosted a 3-day karaoke marathon in Iceland as a protest to protect the natural resources of the country from foreign investors. Anyone will be allowed to sing, and we intend to sing our resources back. It was done in order to raise awareness for an upcoming referendum that would allow Iceland's resources to be publicly owned, and it was a success, with 82% of voters agreeing with her. Here she is singing Joy Division's Love Will Tear Us Apart. Oh boy, here we go. Anna and the Moods is a cursed 2006 animated short film created by the animation company Chaos and written by Sean. It features a surprisingly star-studded cast including Terry Jones from Monty Python, Einar Ern from the Sugar Cubes, Damon Albarn, yes, that Damon Albarn, Stefan Carl Stephenson, who you may know from, and of course, Björk. From what I can tell, Björk only had very few lines, if any, and the role consisted mostly of grunting and making just like noises. Okay, I'm sure everyone worked really hard on this, but I'm sorry, this is cursed as f***. A very disturbed individual put their heart and soul into these character models, and it makes my own soul uneasy. Right now you can find the whole thing on YouTube, but it's overdubbed in Russian, as if the thing wasn't cursed enough already.
Что же с тобой стало?
Скажи нам, пожалуйста. Ненавижу вас.
In 2014, Björk stated in an interview how much she admires the legendary Richard D. James, better known as Aphex Twin, and how over the years they have supported each other and even share music with one another. This got fans ultra hyped for a potential collaboration between the two, but that would never happen. Björk would later clarify that the music they would share was actually other people's music that they would think the other one would find interesting, and that they had mostly lost contact after she left London. This refers to a time in the early 2000s where, during an interview, Björk made a really awful reference to a racist song. She was discussing a museum exhibit where everything looked really nice, but the speakers for the display were shit, and she said that audio is the N-word of the world. This is a reference to the 1972 John Lennon and Yoko Ono track, Woman is the N-word of the world, that was meant to describe how women are often forgotten or given the worst treatment. Yeah, that's a real song, uncensored and everything. I mean, I don't know what to say, man. That's a terrible comparison to make. I don't know if that song was on Björk's mind at the time of the interview or what. Honestly, I want to say she should have known better, but many people all over the world from all different cultures look to American and British pop as a standard of what's trendy without understanding the context. Having lived many years outside the US myself, I can tell you that most people outside of America are completely oblivious to the intricacies and the context surrounding that particular word. John Lennon and Yoko Ono should have definitely never released that track, and they should have known better. All it could have taken was one trusted friend to tell a British man and a Chinese woman at any point in the process not to release that particular song. So, Welcome to Bangkok was the entry referring to when Björk went apeshit on that reporter in Thailand. However, Welcome to Bangkok YouTube channel refers to a YouTube channel that's been up since 2014 that's been posting super rare paparazzi, behind the scenes, and even some home videos of Björk consistently through the years. The clips are never long, but still, the channel gives off creeper vibes for sure. As far as I know, no one knows who's behind it or how they get their footage. This was an incident in 2003 where a con artist going by the name Alex Con8 convinced the promoter of a club in San Francisco that he could book Björk to perform at his club. The fake concert was set up and Con8 fled with $16,000 in ticket sales. There's not much to this one, it's just a funny story. Huh, he even had Con in his fake name. In 1982, Björk, 17 at the time, took part in a multi-week event where several bands attempted to set a world record for the longest continuous live performance. She performed jazz with a group called Stiff Grim, and their set lasted 90 minutes. For the movie The Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, Björk was asked to write a song for the movie. At the time, she was pregnant and nearing her due date, so she declined the offer. Later, the producers for the movie approached her again, saying they'd written a song in her style and asking if she could sing for them. This confused and offended her, seeing how her life's work and artistic voice could be quickly replicated for a commercial product. She declined again as she could only focus on her pregnancy, so they said they would then choose one of 3 Björk kinda singers that they had lined up. Jesus, the nerve on these guys. In the end, they went with Icelandic singer-songwriter Emiliana Torrini. It left Björk with a bitter taste from feeling that artists can have their voices taken in 5 minutes as a product. Jeez, I wonder how she feels about AI art. The song that ended up on the movie ain't even that special, it's just like a movie score ass song. Björk has discussed how the songs Pagan Poetry and Loss are basically 2 sides of the same coin. Pagan Poetry from 2001's Vespertine marks the beginning of her relationship with Matthew Barney, while Loss from 2017's Utopia marks the end of it. They're both extremely emotional songs and they both feature prominent use of a harp. It's my personal hypothesis that Björk's music has become more tragic and melancholy since around Biophilia, with her being more inclined towards topics of loss and introspective analysis. And perhaps the one song that embodies this the most is Body Memory. The song is long and a bit cryptic, but there's no doubt that the lyrics discuss Björk analyzing her decisions in her past and how she wants to live the second half of her life, and inevitably confronting her own mortality. She herself has stated that, among other things, this song was inspired by the Tibetan Book of the Dead, a set of writings with wisdom of life, death, and the afterlife. It's a lot to get into, but the Tibetan Book of the Dead is spiritual and philosophical and existential, and it can really change your perspective on your life. I'm sure age and experience has changed her approach to art over time, but knowing that she's taken some wisdom from the Tibetan Book of the Dead to heart paints a clearer picture of where her mind has been these last few years. If you thought I was schizo posting for making this long ass video on one single artist, well, there's a Brazilian channel here on YouTube named Björk BR that has compiled footage from interviews and live performances to make the ultimate 23-part documentary on Björk. Right now it's sitting at about 9 hours of content. The footage goes through her career, and from what I can tell, they've made it to around Medulla, Drawing Restraint number 9 era, so about 2005. That makes me think they're not even done yet. Björk's song Declare Independence off her 6th album Volta is a high-energy beating anthem of national self-sovereignty that was initially dedicated to the Faroe Islands and Greenland, which are constituent nations under Denmark just as Iceland once had been. Since she wrote it in 2007, this song in particular has not gone over too well with certain governments, and it has affected her touring abilities. She had a concert in Serbia cancelled because earlier in her tour she dedicated Declare Independence to the Kosovo Declaration of Independence movement from Serbia. Most notably, however, while doing a concert in Shanghai, she sang Declare Independence and sprinkled in the phrase Tibet, Tibet. Tibet, Tibet. Tibet, Tibet. Raise your flag. Raise your flag. Multiple times in the performance, and the Chinese government were not happy about that. Since that concert, China has implemented a policy of banning all artists who threaten national sovereignty, as well as approving all performances before they happen. Björk, being the one who caused this new law, is obviously banned, along with Oasis and Bob Dylan. That's it. That's the end of the known iceberg. You did it. The only thing left from here is darkness. These are purely fan hypotheses, theories, speculations, things we only whisper in the shadows. As far as I can tell, this is merely a rumor that for The Phantom Menace, Björk was offered the role of Shmi Skywalker, Darth Vader's mom. I found plenty of references to this bit of trivia, but it was all telephone-style rumors all citing one another. There is no credible source I could find that supports Björk ever being offered a role in The Phantom Menace, just Reddit threads replicating the rumor like a virus. So, if you see this rumor being spread around, just nuke 'em with the old source. In my research for the Björk Stalker, I came across this video that presents an observation that I find interesting and that I haven't seen much of on the web. The theory asks, was the song Hunter and its accompanying video inspired by the tapes of Ricardo Lopez, the obsessed fan who tried to mail Björk an acid bomb? YouTuber Shrouded Hand proposes that the imagery in the video, in which a bald Björk faces the camera and shakes her head until she becomes a CGI metallic bear, is reminiscent of the tapes Lopez made after mailing the bomb. Lopez too made a point to shave his head in the tapes, and according to Shrouded Hand, the lines of face paint that he marks on himself are similar to the CGI lines that appear on Björk's face to form the bear. Hunter is the first track on Björk's third album Homogenic, which released only 1 year after the Stalker incident. Additionally, if you examine the lyrics of the song with this context in mind, some lines can appear to fit as commentary for the whole event. Björk's interpretation of the lyrics is that Hunter is about the high-intensity life that she chooses to live and the stresses that come along with it, and the video was intended to be a minimalist interpretation of that message. Yet, it is intriguing to think that the Stalker incident may have had influence on her inspiration for the song and video, even if just subconsciously. As far as I can tell, there's really nothing to this except like super obscure fan theories that are really weird. I did find that in 2016 someone made a change.org petition for Björk and Tom York to at least consider a romantic relationship. Fuck man, why can't people just be normal about their fandoms? Like, we were literally just talking about stalkers and shit. Okay, I'm not sure what to say about this one, and I want to approach it carefully. There are some fans that theorize that Björk's unique personality and her unique approach to art and music is the result of an undiagnosed neurological disorder such as being on the autism spectrum. In my opinion, this is pretty messed up. I think that it's pretty much impossible to understand how other people think, and to say that someone whose surface level personality traits you don't understand must therefore have a neurological disorder is dismissive, and it's pretty messed up. Everyone always plays up her quirky personality, but you have to realize that she's had an incredibly unique life experience that most of us will never fully comprehend. Plus, since beginning research for this Iceberg, the more that I dive into her person, the more I've come to relate to her perspective. When I was a teen, when I first got into her music, I thought she was weird and liked to do weird stunts for attention. Now, as an adult, I see her wearing a swan dress to an award ceremony and she looks like the only one having fun with her appearance. She looks like the only normal one. Her controversial music videos now just seem like an oasis of raw expression in a desert of advertiser-friendly corporate garbage. Plus, who the f*** are we to diagnose her? We only see the parts of her life that she allows us to see. She's a public figure, not our friend. So unless you know Björk personally and you're a trained neurologist, then it's probably better to keep these opinions to yourself. Except for the one time where she quickly mentioned how she's wondered about it herself when discussing her love for riddles. I am just obsessed with riddles. It felt like the music industry was off the grid and I wanted to solve the riddle. I think I'm probably semi-autistic or something. I'm just obsessed with riddles. See, I told you this quote would come back. This is another weird one. As you've probably become aware by now, Björk is a very sexually open person who isn't shy to discuss sexuality as well as other typically taboo subjects. Well, in 2016, she gave an interview where once again the topic of sexuality and eroticism was brought up, and she had some very strange views on nature. I'm just gonna read you exactly how the interview went. Where sex had been the subject, she has circumvented the mainstream tropes that most female singers have become entangled in. I like a lot of erotic books and films, but I just don't find the kind of Las Vegas, corset and fishnet stockings thing very sexy. It's a bit mediocre, normcore. She also finds the natural world an aphrodisiac. I like bestiality. I get turned on by nature. I don't find the urban brothel situations very hot, but that's just my taste. Like National Geographic porn. I say I've always had a thing for David Attenborough, with whom she made a documentary in 2013. She chuckles. I'm probably more into the animals. I must say, that's some of the weirdest I've heard her say. That last part's the gnarliest, but I think there's a little bit lost in translation. I think the thesis of her statement is in the middle, where she mentions National Geographic porn. Jesus, what the fuck? Which makes me think that seeing animals in nature getting busy is what she's referring to, rather than what most people think when you mention bestiality. Either way, it's a little too much for my tastes. Is it shock value? Is it humor? Who knows, man? I do think it's funny how the interviewer just completely drops the subject and makes a sharp left to the next question. I can just imagine interviewing this artist that he admires, and then she just drops this content nuke and he can't muster a single follow-up question. He is gone. The only video game that Björk has admitted to playing is 2012's Journey, a normie game by all accounts. However, in 2013, apparently she posted this picture of herself on her Facebook as the character Tali from Mass Effect, and the official Mass Effect Twitter account later tweeted it out, leading many to speculate that Björk is much more of a gamer than she lets on. Okay, so I had to talk about this entry. Reddit user Jason Anamunis added this to his Iceberg image, and I had absolutely no idea what he was on about. I actually like the Sugar Cube's music quite a bit, so I'm familiar with their songs. From what I understand, Björk was the main lyricist, so I was already familiar with her highly sexual style of poetry. Obviously, every Sugar Cube song is not about pedo. That's ridiculous. But I figured there must be something more to this entry. I thought of their song Mama, that talks about a woman who has a motherly shape and specifically mentions her large breasts, but that's far from what's being accused here. The song Sick for Toys is about a young girl and boy who are friends, but more like the girl likes to torture and manipulate the boy like he's just another one of her toys, and in the end, the boy snips off the girl's hair while she's sleeping. That's a silly story about two children, but I don't think there's any darker meaning to it. The song in Rhythm and Sorrow discusses a suicidal man and a woman who's trying to coax him off of the ledge of her apartment window. It can be implied that the woman does convince him to come down by offering to have sex with him. After all, she offers him strawberry cake, if you know what I mean. But in that scenario, it's obvious that the two characters are adults. Walkabout is an admiration of the male body as well as a few metaphors for sex, and Hit is about conception and the process of pregnancy. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out where our friend here had conjured up his strange thesis, but then I remembered. Their first hit, and arguably their most famous song, Birthday, has some bizarre lyrics. It discusses the life of a 5-year-old child and the friendship she forms with an older man who lives near to her. The most offending lyrics are, he knows how many freckles she's got, she scratches his beard, he sews a bird in her knickers, and they lie in a bathtub. With the vibe of the song and the way Björk sings it, it takes on a much more innocent and fun tone, so it's easy to forget what's being implied here. For the chorus, she does some of her signature vocalizing with some of the highest energy you'll ever hear from a singer. Maybe that's why even I forgot about the themes of this song. It's like a long forgotten memory that all comes rushing back to you at once. Kinda like how trauma works. Okay, so what does Björk say about it? In a 1996 biography, she said this about Birthday. It's a story about a love affair between a 5-year-old girl, a secret, and a man who lives next door. I was always changing my mind about what the lyrics should be about. I had the atmosphere right from the start, but not the facts. I finally ended up concentrating on this experience I remembered having as a little girl, among many other little girls' experiences. It's like huge men, about 50 years old or so, affect little girls very erotically, but nothing happens, nothing is done. Just this very strong feeling. I picked on this subject to show that anything can affect you erotically. Material, a tree, anything. It's a taboo topic, but I think it is one worth discussing. Björk has never been shy to sing about her personal feelings and experiences, and I respect her so much for that. I think many of us as young children found a form of attraction and even eroticism from older people, and while it probably affects our psychology substantially, these are not experiences we dwell on as adults, and we may even try to erase from our minds. Birthday was simply Björk re-entering her child mind and bringing these feelings and these experiences to the surface. I couldn't find any interesting fan theories about this. It's Björk on the cover of both, so technically you could say they are the same creature as in the same person. I think this entry was added to the Iceberg because the outfit for the cover of Utopia seems to be a kimono of some sort, and the outfit for Homogenic was very famously a kimono. Other than that, maybe the themes of the albums, I don't know. I don't think there's very much to this entry. Björk has seldom spoken about her sexual preferences, so when she does give statements, media outlets run with it for years. In 2004, she gave an interview where she said, "I've always had as many powerful, creative ladies in my life as I have men, and you could probably describe some of those relationships as romantic. I think everyone's bisexual to some degree or another. It's just a question of whether or not you choose to recognize it and embrace it. Personally, I think choosing between men and women is like choosing between cake and ice cream. You'd be daft not to try both, and there are so many different flavors." I don't think that's how that works, but I suppose it's hard for everyone to view the world outside of their own sexual preferences. Sam and the Womp is a British electronic pop group active since 2009. Their debut single, Womp Womp, is by far their most popular track that went #1 in the UK and was featured in commercials and soundtracks to TV shows around the time. If you're from the UK, you may remember this song popping off around that time. Well, the group is on the Iceberg because of their vocalist, the Dutch-born Bloem Delini. Her style of singing is very, very similar to Björk's unique style, as well as the way she presents herself artistically in a way that's very similar to the image that has formed around Björk, to the point where critics have accused her of just copying Björk in lieu of having an artistic personality. Even as she was coming up in the 90s as a solo artist, she received the label Dutch Björk. Personally, I don't think anyone can really help what they naturally look like or what their intuitive singing voice comes out as. That being said, come on bro, you cannot tell me she has not been inspired by Björk, at least a little bit. There isn't much record of Delini herself ever acknowledging the comparison, besides the one time where she dismissed it by simply citing Robert Wyatt as having a bigger influence on her artistically than Björk, which like, okay sure, whatever. Even still, I'm personally of the mind that trying to copyright something as abstract as an artistic image is an exercise in futility, and doing so opens the door to some pretty nasty questions of ownership in art. To the point where I think it's better to let others be influenced and see how far their inspirations take them. But then again, I'm not a published artist with an established image and a back catalog of work that can get ripped from me, so who am I to talk? As we saw earlier in the Iceberg when it came to the Lord of the Rings song, Björk doesn't take too kindly to the idea of her life's work and her artistic voice simply being a style for corporate producers to mimic. Anyway, what do you think? Check out Sam and the Womp and Bloem Delini's solo work and give me your take on the matter. One funny thing I came across in my research was this Angel Fire website. That's right, Angel Fire. Made to point out instances when Delini appears to copy Björk. And I gotta say, I was on the fence, but that tattoo is really sus, man. Maybe I've just stared at the abyss for too long, but at this point, I'm convinced there's nothing really weird about Björk at all. I think early on in her career, she was pigeonholed into this role of being a weird artist and behaving in strange ways, but nothing she's done has convinced me that she's wildly different from anyone else. Most of the weird things about her aren't even true. That she lives on an island, false. That she ate her own shirt, that was a rumor to smear her. That she had a stalker, like that's not even her fault. If I can accuse her of anything, is that she's always been ahead of the curve when it comes to music. Her style is like a response to the cookie cutter 4/4 commercial pop, and because of that, it sounds evolved from it. You know, maybe that's why Björk relates to Kate Bush so much. In her time, Kate Bush was painted under a similar light by the media. She was seen as a strange woman making strange music and living a strange life, but the judgment of time has been much more gracious to her. In a way, I think Kate Bush's music is more fitting to the musical landscape today than it was in the 80s, and it goes way beyond Running Up That Hill. I implore you to listen to Wuthering Heights or Cloud Busting or This Woman's Work. You will see that Kate Bush had a vision of a different kind of pop music than that of her time, and is getting more recognition as time goes on. I feel that something similar will happen to Björk. I feel like someday in the future, some of her music will be rediscovered and it will fit the music of that era better than it does today. And I think the fans of that time will see the injustice of labeling her as simply weird. Björk's not an alien, she's not a fairy, she's not an elf. She's an Icelandic woman with a sense of humor and a need to express herself. Maybe she fancies herself a visionary, or maybe she's simply bored with conventions, but it's undeniable that she's had fun with her career. When she wore that swan dress at the Oscars, while it may have seemed weird at the time, today it just seems like a really fun outfit. When it comes to her music, why not make an all a cappella album? Why not build a swinging pendulum of death to write a song? That just sounds like fun. Today, where most pop stars see their music simply as a financial vehicle, they seem afraid to ask why push the boundary, whereas Björk has always been the one to ask why not. Honestly, the more I read about her, the more she seems like the most normal one in the room. So that's it. That's really the end. Once again, thank you to these 4 users on Reddit for creating their own Iceberg images. And shout out to everybody at r/Björk just for being really cool and having all this cool information. I hope you found this video entertaining or educational or whatever. I just hope you liked it. Once again, I ask you to leave a like and share. Sharing actually makes a really big difference from my experience. So if you know somebody who's into art or who's into Björk particularly, send it their way. Maybe they'll appreciate it, but it helps me out a lot with this channel. And comment your thoughts. I'd love to hear it. Beyond the algorithms and whatever, I'm actually curious to see what other people think of Björk, seeing that she's had like a popular resurgence recently. So I want to see what other people think of her who are like barely discovering her. And if you've watched this whole video, you know, how did it change your perspective on her? What do you think about her now? So yeah, I'd love to hear it. Feel free to leave a comment. If you really want to dive into her music, my biggest recommendation would probably be some of her greatest hits compilations. She has some official greatest hit albums like the Family Tree Box, and those are great. You cannot go wrong with those. But even here on YouTube, there's fan compilations of the best of her work, and you really can't go wrong there. Her most approachable albums, and what I think if you're barely getting into her you would like to hear the most, are Vespertine and Homogenic. Those are so well crafted, so well made, and they are not that hard to get into it. You'll still recognize it as pop music even if it is a little bit strange. So yeah, if you want to dive into an entire album from her, try Homogenic or Vespertine. Other than that, that's it for me. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you enjoy what I do here and want to see more of it. I go live on Twitch every Monday through Thursday around 7 p.m. Central. And we just do whatever. We check out other videos on YouTube. We play video games. We chat. So feel free to check it out. And that's it. I'll see you guys later. Bye.